Welcome to another edition of Cattle Chatter. I'm Susan Littlefield, and when you're right, you're right. That's exactly how we're going to start this whole show out because last week, if you remember, Brad was talking about how bullish this trade was going to be turning. And look where we're sitting this week. And that's exactly where we're going to start. Why this cattle market is on fire from a cash perspective. We know that there's struggles within the boxed beef, but how short are they truly in the South? Well, I mentioned him. Brad Kooima with Kooima Kooima Varilek joins us for today. He is, of course, out of Sioux Center, Iowa, and soon to be the fact that $12 jump in the cash out of Nebraska to start out this week. But this cash market is the one that's really pushing for the trade.
It's on fire. Thanks for having me on. And my wife would tell you, don't feed his ego. It's big enough already, right? We talked last week about it was starting to feel like we were getting through some cattle. We're looking at the right spot on the calendar here, of course, too, where it's happened before. I like I said, I like me better when I'm bullish. And I think most of the people that listeners, they want to hear something encouraging. So it's been fun to see the market. It completely outperformed my expectations. I thought we were going to start to firm up here, but to gallop higher like we've done on the cash market is really remarkable. And to try to give a little recap, I guess, or who shot who, whatever you want to call it. I thought it was interesting. We saw the same pattern the last 2 weeks, or this week and last week. And that pattern is that we started with midweek strength in the north before there was any south trade. And I think the message I'm getting from that, or the interpretation I'm going to take from that, is that you got a packer that knows how tight things are in the South, knows how difficult it's going to be to get cattle procurement done in the South. And so they go, well, why don't we get some business done where we know there's cattle? Nebraska has record numbers of cattle on feed. Nebraska more cattle than Texas right now for the first time. Good for us, right? And so they went ahead and got pretty aggressive here in the north last week. And then the south ended up being even higher. And then this week, the same story where we jumped bids yesterday I had to do a little speech at noon. And my brother, who sells my cattle, texted me just as I was getting ready to do that. Then I have to shut off my phone, of course. Would you take 225? Sure. And so by the time I've done with my little spiel, I get my phone back off. I got 21 texts. The first one of the cattle are sold for 25. Now it's 27. Now it's 28. And he's kind of apologizing that the cattle got sold. It is what it is. I think he did a great job. So we finished up yesterday at 228, which you remember 3 weeks ago when we were bid 208. Yeah. And, trouncing around with our jaw on the ground. I sure do. So I didn't expect it to turn this quickly, but that's just been the nature of the beast. It's gone down quickly too, of course. So feels good. And to add to that, we talked about clean up some, feeling like we're not super current, right? I've talked about that over and over till people are sick of me talking about it. But I thought we did a nice job this week. We really moved a lot of cattle here this week, and I feel like we got a lot of those big cattle out of the way. I was reminded this morning, somebody said to me, you still believe in that old statement of yours? And I'm going like, which one is that? I got so many of these silly statements. But the one he was talking about was that every market begins and ends in Iowa. And so I'd like to think that we did a pretty nice job of cleaning up these Iowa big cattle this week, and feels great going, looking forward here.
Well, I want to talk about the South in a moment, but obviously you talk about how heavy these weights were. And last week when we were talking, we had some concerns too, Brad, about the weather and the storm systems and these clippers that are continuing to come through. And you had made the comment about, well, this should help with the crazy weight gains we've been seeing.
Well, I think it two things. Now, my little area happens to be the beneficiary of every snowstorm so far this spring. And not that it's a wreck, but we've got like 15 inches of snow on the ground, and it rained. And so we lost a little bit of it. We got the same deal today where you've got like basketball games for the high school got canceled tonight, So anyway, the rest of the deal to me is you've got a situation where the weather slows the gain down, but it also makes the feeder go like, holy buckets, I don't need to have a 1,700-pound steer tip over here and die for what they're worth, so it's full of, makes you more incentivized to sell it, I think, too. So a combination of that. But I really didn't answer your question very good on how tight they are in the South. They're so tight that they buy cattle from Iowa and pay the freight to go all the way down to the middle of Texas. Okay. They'll buy cattle up here. I have this personally experienced all three of these this week and last week. Texas, Dodge City, Kansas, and someplace in Pennsylvania. I mean, it's weird. Today, cattle bought sold here that are going to go to Illinois. Okay. And they're all paying the freight. So it's clear that numbers are desperately short in some of those areas, and they have to export cattle from our area to get them there. And that's good for us.
Very much so. So we know, and we talked about it a little bit last week with more of a basic explanation of the inspection they were going to do at the border there, or the inspection site in Arizona. Really, we acknowledge it's happened, but we're still waiting. And do you have any inkling as to when, or have you heard?
Yeah,
because everybody's questioning the same thing at this point.
I know, and it's like, are we not bloody sick of talking? I mean, I know I am speculating, and why would you go inspect a border point unless you're going to say something about it, right? I mean, it's like, so the gate's still closed, or what? I mean, so that was Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Heard very little out of there, other than reported that yes, there indeed was a team that had gone. Okay, and then nothing.
Right.
So the expectation would be that you would think there'd be a follow-up presser or something, right? Some kind of a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And would that not now normally? So that would be the very safest place to start if they were going to start. I mean, from talking to people down there, which I have, that's an area that hasn't had any screwworm whatsoever. It's colder there, first of all, than other parts of the central part of Mexico. This is the far west, Sonora, the far western state that hangs right below Arizona and New Mexico. Okay, they've got extremely a difficult protocol of what it takes, which includes Ivomec, which includes the dip fatting and all this other stuff. So it would seem like it's not a big reach to connect the dots and say, well, I wonder if they aren't going to start to trickle a few cattle in there. And I guess that would be my expectation. Hopefully we've beat this horse to death for so long that it isn't that big of a surprise. And the, Rollins has said over and over that even when they start, it'll be very slow, which I would agree with.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it doesn't have that any kind of real drama, but those algos that read headlines are always tricky. Let's get the news out of the way so we can get on down the road.
Exactly. And I'd read earlier this week that they said they have it 99.1% contained in that area that has the biggest outbreak. So hopefully they say it doesn't spread, but it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward.
Yeah, they got to ship those cattle to Fargo where you are. I don't think the larvae is going to survive, 12 below zero, right?
No, not at all. And 6 to 8 inches of snow that's been happening here. What's your thoughts? How are the fundamentals as you look at the big picture this week?
Well, every day there's good news. Every day there's bad news. I don't care if we're talking about coffee, cattle, cocoa, doesn't matter. That's just the way the nature of the market is. Okay. So yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time here this week and last week on what I feel is improving news. If we got to take a look at some of the other side of the market, which we should, supply and demand, box beef is no runaway. In fact, it has to get better just to be lousy. We've slipped at a time where we almost always see the boxes start to firm up, led by the middles, led by the expensive cuts, the stuff that you might, start to kind of push for the holiday period. Right. And that just hasn't happened yet. And I don't hear that there's great cleanup, great push in the beef market either from the people I talk to right now. So that's a little disappointing. Now, we're not trading box beef. We're trading live cattle futures. But, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Okay. I hope that we see some improvement of that. Otherwise, the next step, of course, would be that we'll see how much they slow the kill down to try to prop up the product that way. So that would be one of the issues, I think. The other more macro issue to me, Susan, still is something that I think we got to be sensitive to. Is I know that there's some high price break evens on the yearling cattle that were bought this late summer. And if we're not there, cattle that break even at 250 or above, there's lots of those. And so even after being $12 higher in Nebraska, you're still not at 250, and if we're still sitting there in 30 days from now, and you and I are talking about this, we're going to have to start to get sensitized again to, oh boy, now we're going to start holding cattle and starting to overfeed and yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, that's tomorrow's worry, but it's one that I guess, I have a tendency to think that far ahead, which is probably not a great idea, but I believe you're a better trader when it's hard enough to figure out. It's better to look ahead as to try to figure out today. That's what I'm trying to say, in my opinion.
No, that makes sense. Well, as we get ready to wrap this up and seeing the continued lowers in the boxes, what is your takeaway of that? And obviously, holiday procurement should be done by this point.
Correct. I don't know whether, it was the psychology of beef's too high. Did that resonate with the consumer? Even though I can see lots of places, even on my local deal here, where ribeyes and strip steaks are not bad. I mean, it's all relative. I think the hamburger stuff has suffered. And I think, there's real pushback to some of this $7-8 hamburger that's at places. Now, one of the things on the hamburger is, so for those of you who don't know, Brazil has always had a quota system. Okay. Mm-hmm. If they reach a certain number, then they get a tariff, right? I mean, so what'll happen as the first of the year, they start over with this deal. Now, last year, or this year where we're in, I think that they had met their quota already by the middle or the end of February. And so then that first, 26% tariff went on.
Right.
So when we get to January 1, there should be the ability to import some real cheap hamburger. And I'm not saying what side of the fence I'm on here politically, whether we should do it, whether we shouldn't. I think we should label it. We should be able to know where it came from. We know where our bananas came from, for goodness sakes. Why can't we know where everything comes from? It doesn't seem like it's that complicated. But maybe that would change that a little bit. But that segment of the market does bother me. And you can even see a little bit of a nuance how much the hogs, this is getting long-winded, I apologize, but the hog thing is actually improved, which tells me that the demand stuff for that, which maybe that's getting priced into the consumer's wallet, that's kind of that recession-proof deal, when people are sensitive to budget. Seems like pork moves better than the beef side. There's some signs here that things might be slowing up a little bit on that demand sector. So I don't want to dwell on it because right now there ain't enough cattle to go around, but it's something to worry about.
All right. And last but not least, happy early birthday, Brad.
Yeah, we touted that for a long time, right? Talking about, being bullish a little bit before that. Yeah. Prime rib Monday for my birthday. So, I'm going to do my part for demand.
All right. Thanks so much. Happy birthday, Brad. We appreciate it. Of course, another edition of Cattle Chatter. I'm Susan Littlefield.
The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.